The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Let's be honest, if we're telling a sad story for laughs, we're skipping over some of the sadness that came later, right?
That's true. Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it, because the sadness that comes later, that's easy enough. It's laughing about it that's really the skill that you want to learn.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. This week we're reviving the Sad Stories Told for Laughs series with Don Chaffer. I first knew Don Chaffer as the husband half of the husband-wife duo Waterdeep. His wife Lori is the wife half. Don has also made a name for himself in the field of musical theater as a composer, lyricist, and librettist. His musicals include The Sparkly Clean Funeral Singers, Son of a Gun, and The Unusual Tale of Mary and Joseph's Baby. In the last few years, he's also been a professor in Lipscomb University's School of Music. Don Chaffer has always struck me as a storyteller who knows what to do with sadness and also what to do with humor. He is, in short, an ideal guest for Sad Stories Told for Laughs. Don Chaffer, thank you for being on the Habit Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
When I started the Sad Stories Told for Laughs series, the first person I thought I wanted to have on this series was Don Chaffer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that could be greatly disappointing then.
Well, that seems... Actually, you mentioned to me, of course, the point of Sad Stories Told for Laughs is people discussing their professional embarrassments.
Yes.
And what that has worked in them, either creatively or in their soul or whatever. And you mentioned a little while ago, and when it was too late for me to cancel this whole thing, that early in relatively early in your life, you sort of burned out your embarrassment receptors.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so for example, I had like a best friends in grade school that hung out with all the time, and their parents were regrouting their bathtub, and they thought, well, we'll take the shower curtain down. This way no one will use the shower, which doesn't occur to me that that's a problem. So I proceeded to take a shower and not only ruin whatever was going on with the grouting, but shoot water across the entire bathroom. Which, again, I'm going to have like maybe 20 to 30 anecdotes that are exactly that funny and that long. I hope is that the format?
I'll see what I can do with it.
Yeah, and I've been mocked relentlessly by, my best friend's dad for that. But
how old were you at the time, by the way?
That's, grade school. It's like third, fourth, fifth grade, something like that.
All right.
That was also when we took a field trip to the cemetery, and I had to go to the bathroom real bad. Mrs. Vishy was our teacher, and I said, Mrs. Vishy, I have to go to the bathroom, but you're in a graveyard.
Yeah.
We were doing, the rubbings, grave.
I was going to ask you why you were doing a field trip to a
Yeah, it's
cemetery.
An interesting choice, particularly when you really have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so there's no bathroom available? And I ask her, and she says, well, we're going to be done here in just a minute. Okay, you know.
Yeah.
So I go back a second time. Mrs. Vishy, I really, really need to go to the bathroom. And then finally a third time, I say, Mrs. Vishy, never mind. And they had to drop me off at home. And then my mom would have this woman come clean our house once a week. That happened to be the time what are you doing here? Nothing, you know, run upstairs. And I also was a chronic bedwetter till the 6th grade, so I have a trail of ruined couches behind me as well. So there was kind of a lot of this sort of stuff. And then when I get to high school, that's when I decide to push the limits of fashion. And so I wore my dad's flight suit and like a purple bandana and these split-toed Japanese tabi, I think they're called, the shoes, and then chemistry safety goggles that I personally decorated. That was one of my outfits.
Okay.
I had other ones.
How many times did you wear that outfit to school?
Oh, I mean, per semester, maybe 4 or 5 times.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I had like a pink pants and a seersucker jacket and a red bow tie was another outfit that was kind of like a
sounds like
a dandy. And then I also made my own T-shirts like "Love One Another," which I made one that said "Love One Another" but I used a palette knife and red ink, and it looked more like a Manson murder sort of a thing instead of like a biblical. So the point being, at one point, my mom confronts me and she says, so I've been thinking about why you do this, and I think it's that you don't want to be rejected by people. So you figure, if I just, make it so that I know why you've rejected me, then I don't ever have to feel rejected. So this is where we're telling sad stories told for sadness.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So your mother was right about this?
I think so. I mean, I denied it at the time vociferously. But
So
by the time I get on the stage, I'm ready to make fun of myself at any point. So, for example, when we had, and this wouldn't have been a great story anyway, but I'm just going to keep them rolling, right? They're just small, moderately entertaining bits. That's going to be my thing. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but so we had this, end of the first chorus of this new song. Instead of ringing out for 4 counts, because we're in 4/4, I decided to ring it for 5 because it needed just a little extra. And then the very first night, after 4 counts, I come in, bold as can be, and the rest of the band comes in a quarter note later. But in that moment, I thought, whoops, and yelled out, woohoo, right over top of my own bad entry. So we made a career of more or less making fun of ourselves. So I was never beyond stopping the band and going, whoops, we totally screwed that up. Let's try it again. And, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So do you draw any connection between this idea that your embarrassment receptors were gone,
right?
Which, by the way, the evidence that you tried it out for your high school career, it was very convincing. Right?
Thanks. I also, by the way, I had a yellow 1978 Honda Express 2 moped that I bungeed a milk crate on the back. I carried a Samsonite briefcase that I bought in Tijuana that was where I also bought a machete that my dad said had been leather cured by human urine. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly smelled dodgy. At any rate, so I had the suitcase, the yo-yo, the moped, and then I had one of those, like the cheapest possible Dot brand red moped helmet with the smoke-tinted shield where I don't know if they even make these anymore, but it was kind of, the effect was that the whole thing was just a globe of anonymity. And then I stuck sucker darts on the top, so it was sort of Marvin the Martian. I don't know if he had an antenna, but it looked spacey.
So somehow you got from, forgive me, but this is, you sound a little obnoxious.
Yeah, very.
As a high school person.
For sure.
I certainly would have given you a swirly if we'd gone to the same high school.
Yeah,
But somehow that, forgive me, sounds not especially mature self-expression, has developed into something a little more mature. And I mean, I enjoy the work you do now.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, if I'd known you in high school, I would have written you off completely.
Yeah.
And that's
I get
that's
that.
saying as much about me as it is about you, right?
Sure.
And then thankfully,
Let's talk about
thankfully
that.
I didn't know anything about you or your work until you had outgrown this.
Yeah. Are you asking how does that obnoxious a kid get to have any sort of emotional
like
depth?
you.
A superstar. Yeah.
No, I don't know. This is interesting to me. I mean, that was again, forgive me, but sounds a little sophomoric.
It was literally sophomore year that this peaked, I would say. Yeah. Not that that's right.
Yeah. And what's the question?
I
thought maybe this would shake something loose for you now.
I think it's. I will say that at the same time that I was preoccupied with this sort of chicanery. I think
it was.
Okay, at the same time that I was preoccupied with this chicanery, I was also pretty morbidly preoccupied with existential dread. Okay. So I think it was a
How's the existential dread going now?
Well, it's been a rough couple of years here lately.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it has been with the pandemic, but pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I've realized about existential dread is that there's existential dread and then there's brain chemistry. And so sometimes you can say, oh, maybe this isn't really significant. This is just an emotion.
Yeah.
And I don't have to unravel the fabric of reality in order to contend with this because I might just be tired or, especially in the heyday of like working in the studio and stuff like that. And I'm put in 60, 70-hour weeks and I'd be exhausted at the end of the week. And my wife would remind me of this and say, maybe we don't have to make a career change or adopt a child this weekend. I didn't really talk about adopting children on the weekend as much as career changing on the weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I'm not here to make light of adoption, I guess is what I'm saying. So anyway,
one thing we talked about before we started recording is the idea. You mentioned that there's a distinction between embarrassment and shame.
Yeah. My embarrassment receptors may be blown, but my shame receptors are always working. So Enneagram-wise, the personality test thing, I'm a 4 in the Enneagram, which is one of the shame-based personalities. And so I would say that it was like, I'm not sure I realized how shame-oriented I was until later in life. And it was like, it's like the fish with water thing.
Yeah,
like,
right.
That thing, doesn't everybody feel that all the time?
You thought that was just reality, and it turns out it was.
Yeah, I remember hearing somebody talk about the 4 being like preoccupied with a sense of irredeemable deficiency, and I was like, that's ground zero. That's Tuesday for me. So, so I think of that as a different thing. The idea of feeling some sense of. It's also not usually told for laughs very well.
Yeah, right. I know. I'm trying to.
Yeah. You're trying to.
But I'm also interested in what you're saying here. I mean,
remember that time Don did a podcast about funny stories and none of them were funny? So I think that.
To what extent does shame drive does it drive your creative work? I mean, there have been times in my life where it's like, what got me up and writing, and this didn't, frankly, I burned out on it pretty quickly, but what got me out of bed was, I'm so ashamed of lying in bed and not being productive that I got to get up and it was shame that made me, and then I reached a point where it's like, this doesn't work anymore, and this idea that I'm not going to get up and be productive until the pain of being unproductive outweighs the pain of
right.
Like I had to get past that, but I know that there was plenty of shame in my own ability to
well, and I guess there's shame as a motivator, which is what that is, and I definitely have had that. Like sort of, there's even sometimes I have to admit I even use that. There's almost a sense of like, let yourself feel that a little bit until it does motivate you, and I don't know that that's maybe it's not, path A, but it does result oftentimes in breaking the inertia. Mm-hmm. But then that's shame sort of as motivator, but then there's sort of shame as state of being. So, for example, like the one of the other four things is this idea of envy, which I couldn't relate to. I didn't feel very envious of many people until I realized somebody was describing envy in this particular personality as believing that other people had something in their lives that you didn't have in yours. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's just true.
Yeah.
Right? Like that feeling of, and so there's also an Orthodox prayer I ran into one time that talked about how it was a prayer of confession, forgive me for when I've been wounded by the beauty of another. And I thought, oh man, that I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah.
So it's not that I wish I had the beauty, it's that their beauty made me sad because I didn't have it.
There's a Catholic catechism that defines envy as a form of sadness. And I think that's a really helpful way of thinking about envy.
Now, I will say, sad stories told for what?
Laughs.
I have a lot of that. I've had a lot. My sister and I, in particular, we've had a number of in our lives. Our dad was a complicated character, and laughing at stuff. Even to this day, I've been working on a memoir and interacting with her a lot. And the number of times that we'll have something that's literally in tears, followed by incredible laughter. That's a common occurrence. I bet you'd want to know an example of it, but
I would.
And I'm going to get back with you on it, I promise, by the end of the podcast.
You mentioned four things a minute ago. Did you say something about four things? That you said one of the four things is envy?
Oh, I
shame,
meant
envy?
Of a four.
Oh, yeah, got you. Of a four.
Yeah,
Enneagram 4.
Yeah, Enneagram 4, yeah.
So envy, not a part of your.
Well, I don't experience it as I wish I had that guy's car, right? But more like sometimes when I see someone succeed, it will make me feel sad that I haven't succeeded in a similar way. Yeah. And sometimes incomprehensibly, I don't want to succeed in that way, right?
Right.
And a lot of times even, it doesn't make me sad about not having that kind of success. It makes me sad about not having my own kind.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's a thing.
Have you ever seen that Pacific Life insurance commercial where there's this handsome silver-haired couple standing on a boat, and then a whale breaches?
Okay.
And I don't think of myself as being an envious person, except that commercial just killed me. I was like, I can't take my wife to go see a whale.
Right.
Because I obviously was not financially responsible like those people.
I see. I didn't know that was what the prerequisite was for the whale breaching. So the idea is, if you had put your money into retirement with us, you'd be in good shape right now. But here you are on your couch, you loser. Right.
Yeah, that for whatever reason, I
get that.
That whale is it's like Captain Ahab.
I was smirking through that the whole time because I was thinking about Liberty Mutual. And they have a lot of goofy. I kept thinking we were heading somewhere goofy, I misread that. So I'm feeling pretty embarrassed about that right now. Can I tell the story for laughs?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I definitely. I feel that, like the feeling of. That's why we can't have nice things. Sort of, I have curry on my shirt right now.
Yeah. Well, thankfully the moray is so overwhelming that nobody can see it.
I wear plaid, as Pete pointed out to me. I wore plaid to a shoot.
Yeah. Okay, so have you come up with any examples of you and your sister?
No, but I will say this. I did. So as far as I have a couple other maybe. Okay. Yeah, I've got a couple. So one, an actual on-stage thing. There was this cartoon that I read about the angriest dog in the world. And I decided I should write a song about it, which this is plenty embarrassing to begin with. But it's a comedy song. Yeah. This is the angriest dog in the world. I can sing it, and I'll license it for free to the podcast.
Thank you.
And so we did it, and then I took a big guitar solo and played it at this coffee shop, and at the middle of the guitar solo, I dropped to my knees, right? And I'm just, mostly just bending one note over and over, kind of Neil Youngish. And people are really laughing, and I mean, hard. And I'm thinking, this is really going great. I mean, this Angriest Dog thing and the guitar solo, I'm really hitting here.
Yeah.
And then I got up, and there was a giant split in the crotch of my pants. And that was both embarrassment and shame roiling over me. It's almost a warm bath. If you think about shame or embarrassment, and you kind of separate the agony at an emotional level, physically, it's perfectly delightful. But that was pretty embarrassing. I felt pretty bad about that. And then this is the opposite end of the example in terms of the embarrassment receptors. My wife is not this way. She's certainly capable of being embarrassed and has had to put up with.
Maybe I should have had her on the podcast.
Well, that's true. And she could tell plenty of embarrassing stories about me, about having to stand next to me. Yeah. Not least of which is that we've done a couple different Kickstarter campaigns where we did videos that are sort of based on these intentionally comedic conceits, right? So in the first one, I hold a press conference for 3 people that show up, and I kind of go off the rails, right? And so we do a montage of me.
That one, yeah.
And so she was just recently mentioning this because she's working with an artist she's been producing lately, and she said, I suddenly rewatched that, and I thought, I'm trying to convince this woman that she should do a record with me, and this is what's out there, And I watched it again and just thought I was the funniest thing in the world. I watched it with my daughter. I thought, this is hilarious. And in fact, then when we did the second Kickstarter campaign, we did the conceit that I was getting into hip-hop dancing suddenly at a late age.
Yeah.
And so I filmed myself dancing in the bathroom, doing mostly, as I say, hip-hop. But I kind of emerge into more expressionistic dancing later.
It's funny, I was thinking about contributing to that Kickstarter, then I saw the video and chose not to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. And so,
secondhand embarrassment.
So I watched that one, and I rewatched that as well. I also thought it was great. My daughter thought it was great. I think I'm hilarious. And then I did get a contact from my 8th grade ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
And she said, very funny, and I hadn't talked to her in ages. She said, I did get a question from one of my coworkers. Why are you watching a video of a man grabbing his crotch right now? And then she had to answer, this is what I find funny. She would have to answer, it's my ex-boyfriend from 8th grade. I find that, I'm too busy finding humor in that to consider how I have been used as a tool in the process.
I think one thing that's funny about that story is you twice refer to this as being ex-boyfriend and ex-girlfriend. Like, we kind of take it for granted that you're 8th grade.
I just wanted to be real clear. I mean, Facebook, that could get dangerous.
That's true, yeah.
It is really putting the nail in the coffin on that one. It's over.
Good.
No, anyway, but I just think it's... I will say, I remember watching Will Ferrell at one point, and you're going to have Dave Barnes on, or you already have, I don't know where we are in the release schedule. I was told that this is not going to be edited, but I'm still giving my edit. You might want to cut this part out. I've also heard that that's a joke that's been used a lot, so cut the joke out. What were we talking about?
Dave Barnes.
Oh,
somehow Dave
comedy.
Barnes. Yeah.
Will Ferrell. I just remember watching Will Ferrell do the cowbell sketch, and his shirt would kind of ride up on him, which is, by the way, because I felt I had a similar physique to Will Ferrell. I think I still do. I think we're tall, lanky, forward head carriage, a little bit extra prosperity, as my dad referred to it, around the midsection. And he wore a shirt that's a little too short when he's playing the cowbell. And it's definitely one of the funniest parts. And I thought, the thing about comedy is you just have to embrace those things. Like, anything goes, debasing yourself for the laugh. And there was a switch in my head, even later in life, about that, so that when those Kickstarter videos came up, I was ready to just...
You're ready to go.
Ready to let it all rip. There you go.
Okay. I should have prepared more questions
Yeah, I have other notes. Let me just make sure. I do have a really good story about a friend getting real embarrassed. Yeah, just cut this part out. Nope, that's it.
Really?
I don't know. I mean, this is pretty much it. I'm still trying to think of what the thing. Here's the thing about the stories with my sister and is that Norm Macdonald used to say that he thinks the best jokes are the ones where the setup and the punchline are pretty much the same. So, for example, one of his weekend update was that, Julia Roberts and Lyle Lovett got divorced recently, and apparently the trouble started when she realized she was Julia Roberts and he was Lyle Lovett. And so that's the setup is Julia Roberts and Lyle Lovett punchline. Yeah. So I feel like that's true in family tragedies, where somehow there can be a moment where the very thing that is heartbreaking just becomes funny. You just repeat it. Isn't that ridiculous? And then it's like, and then you can start laughing about it. But that's not going to translate very well either for this podcast. I'm starting to realize, the more I think about it, how woefully unprepared I am for this. Which I want you to know, it's not that I didn't spend time thinking about it. I actually spent a fair bit of time, talked to my wife, almost called my sister, forgot to. And then I kind of thought, well, if I embarrass myself, won't that just be good?
Yeah. Well, you have no reason to be embarrassed here, Don. We're all friends here.
We're playing it for laughs.
Yeah, right. But I do want to hear a little more about where the all of the existential dread, the shame, the embarrassment.
See? That's not funny, but it is funny.
It is kind of funny.
Yeah, right?
When you start
the existential dread, the shame, the embarrassment.
Like how these things shape the way you think about your work as a person who writes songs, writes musicals, now teaches.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is your first semester teaching. I should think there would be that might be a rich vein for.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I've yet to teach them without masks. And so all this incredible comedy I'm rolling out for you, it's fallen on deaf ears for the currency of the references, which I have a problem with. And also because I can't tell when they're smirking, which I'm not looking for guffaws, but a smirk goes a long way to keep you rolling.
Yeah, right.
That's when you can really start stacking your punchlines. And I'm not getting that, so I'm having to resort to just telling them about how Sid Vicious probably stabbed his girlfriend to death.
Not even funny.
No, but it's part of the history of popular music, which I taught last semester. I figured it was appropriate at a Christian university to cover that side of things because you want to get out from under the shelter at some point.
That's right. And I've said it's your first semester teaching. Not true. It's your first semester teaching full time.
Right. Yeah, I've been adjuncting before this.
Yeah.
Which is a word for teaching part-time.
Teaching part-time for really, really bad pay.
I think you just said teaching part-time. I'm not positive.
I don't think
you
so.
guys can rewind that. Maybe cut it out.
Anyway, existential dread.
Yes.
Shame, embarrassment.
Yep. How do they affect my work?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes.
Well, okay, so, without having to convert this into humor, right?
Right.
I think, one of the things, so I ended up going into music theater about 10 years ago. I've written several musicals now. And one of the things I've recognized is like when I have a low point for a character, like the kind of despairing, nihilistic moment, man, those songs just flow out of me with no problem. I can imagine the let's just burn it all down, what's the point moments very easily. And so my work, I think, over the course of my life has been a lot of wrestling with that and trying to find redemptive moments in the muck. And I think, which is hard to do sometimes. Hard to do, and on the other hand, is utterly written into the code of the universe, right? So it's always there. The redemption's always around somewhere. even if you have to grope for it. But I think that's been a piece, and I think I also just assumed for a long time that other people felt the way we did, and as it turns out, some people did, but not everybody, which is why we weren't maybe a household name, because it's, but we had fans that were real devoted.
Yeah.
And it's good.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
I mean, you speak of, you use the term existential dread, which I get the idea of feeling that, but it's also you have a worldview whereby that's not the ultimate.
No.
Right? Something that you
Right.
experience, but it's not the same. But that's not the same thing as saying this is the ultimate.
Right.
The big truth about.
I had a friend though that told me one time we were talking about doubts, or just maybe I don't know if there was somewhat about doubts with regard to faith, but also just deconstruction or reconstruction of faith. And there was a moment after I kind of went on a long run, and he goes, "Oh, I just figured it out. What you like to do is set up all the things you don't think and then mow them all down at once." He goes, "So I just have to wait till you're done setting up all these negatives and then hear what your positive will be. And then I can comment, because if I comment too early, I'll end up with an argument with you about something you don't actually believe." So I do think that that's true. That's a truism about the way that I tend to process through things.
Yeah.
It's like sort of look at the worst of it first, and then kind of like, have we told the truth about what we're up against? And then what's the answer to it?
Sounds like Dostoevsky. I mean, he was so good at articulating the position he didn't agree with.
Yeah, I compare myself frequently to
Right. It's the
Dostoevsky.
beard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how that picks up in the microphone.
And there's some built-in ironic distance in this, right? If as a Christian person who can wade around in the
Muck.
But also believes that this muck isn't all there is. There is some distance built in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. How do you mean? I mean, I get distance and I get ironic. I think I get ironic. I know Alanis didn't quite nail it.
Right.
But
she nailed
not
it.
like rain on your wedding day.
For the kind of irony. I mean, she was talking about verbal or situated, whatever kind of irony she was talking about. But I just mean this idea that if you think about it in a novel, for instance, where something, that you see the characters and you're sitting in a different position and you know things they don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have not thought of myself looking at myself that way. But if that's what you mean, like I have a sense sometimes that I can sort of, and I think that's where the laughter comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Is you see, this looks pretty bleak.
Yeah.
But you have enough of a disconnect to say, but it won't always seem quite so bleak. Yeah. At some point, everything which is hidden will be revealed. Mm-hmm. All the sad things will become untrue. And I'm mingling in some scripture and some Tolkien here. Yeah. And so therefore, there's that Paul bit about, suffering counted as glory.
Anyway. Counted as all joy.
Yeah, when you encounter various trials, there's that one.
The weight of glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Et cetera.
Et cetera.
Yeah. So, I do think there is, it's funny to refer to that as ironic distance, because it's like the dramatic irony of I know something about me that I don't know. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but
it's true, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah, I do think that's true. Yeah.
When I think of the songs you write and the musical theater that you do, that makes a lot of sense to me. This, including the idea of lining up things you don't agree and kind of mowing them down at all at once. That's kind of a eucatastrophe anyway, right? This moment of the sudden turn.
Yeah, and I think you mean a word that is eucatastrophe, E-U-C-A-T.
Yeah.
And as opposed to a catastrophe.
yeah, that's right.
But what is a eucatastrophe again?
It's I assume Tolkien made it up, but I don't know if he did or didn't. I may be wrong about that.
It's a European catastrophe.
It's the good catastrophe. What's the opposite of fatal fall? The fortunate fall. So when things look like the worst they could possibly look, and then here comes Gandalf over the hill.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is that? Would you say when Jesus says, "Fall on the rock and be broken, or it'll fall on you, you'll be ground to powder"? Would you say the former is the eucatastrophe versus the catastrophe?
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's not quite as optimistic as Gandalf coming over the mountain. It's like getting humbled, right? Like in that way.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah.
I will say, I was just thinking today about the idea of someone who. Oh, I was hearing Steve Buscemi talk on a podcast about his character in Fargo, which I've actually never seen. But he said, I loved the fact that this guy was like, I got this, and he never had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I do think that is hysterically funny. Almost always. And I find it funny in myself, right? And there was something about watching those videos, which could easily be considered legitimately embarrassing to me and my wife. Especially as she's pursuing legitimate production work from legitimate artists.
Yeah, right.
That also makes me laugh. As another layer of, wow, I really screwed you over on this one, hon. Sorry about that. I find that really funny. Trust me. Okay, so there's this, that moment. Oh, trust me. I got this. That's every Coen Brothers movie. Yeah,
somebody who thinks they've got it and they don't.
That's true.
We're going to kidnap this baby. Right. It's going to be awesome.
So this friend of mine told me this story. As far as embarrassing stories go, it's not mine, but my word. So it's high school. They're having a date auction for guys. And this friend of mine he's like skinny musician type, but he and his buddy think, well, if we go 2 for 1, how could it go wrong? Which again, that's the moment. That's the hubris. The fatal flaw is already in place. How could it go wrong? Oh, trust me, it could go wrong. So they get up there, and they've just seen a football player auctioned off for however much and it's in an auditorium with not the entire school, and so they get up there and they're kind of like, okay, we have an odd one now. It's a 2 for 1 deal, and then they're kind of doing this thing, and which is funny because they're skinny and everything. And my buddy's friend goes, "Hey, bend over." He's like, "What?" He goes, "Trust me," and he goes, and then he oil checks him, sticks his thumb, and he turns around like, what? And there's this audible silence that goes out across the room. And somebody goes, $1. And he goes, sold. And they get off the stage in this kind of catastrophe. And then it's Thursday. They don't go to school on Friday. They're mortified. It comes Monday, and they go in, and their buddy says, hey, I saw your auction thing. What do you mean? Were you there? And he goes, no, it was recorded and played on cable access all weekend long. And so everybody's been watching it. And it turns out that they never, the whole rest of their, anyway, I find that quite funny. That moment when he says, trust me, I don't know if I said this part, trust me, it'll be cool. That's the best part.
That's a sad story told for laughs.
Yeah. Yeah, because it had some real sad consequences. He's gone on to be quite successful as a musician. But
I think the typical format of the sad stories told for laughs is that sadness comes first and the humor comes later.
I see. But yeah, in this case, it was really funny in the moment. But let's be honest, if we're telling a sad story for laughs, we're skipping over some of the sadness that came later, right?
That's true, yeah.
And that's the whole point of it, because the sadness that comes later, that's easy enough. It's laughing about it that's really the skill that you want to learn.
Amen. Don Chaffer,
yeah,
thank you for being in this episode of Sad Stories Told for Laughs.
Thank you. And I hope that they're not happy stories told for sadness. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. and all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate. Special thanks as well to Taylor Linhart for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for Season 3 of the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorlinhart.com.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.